Medea and the Swans. The little engine in this story is a real engine and was built by Jim and his friends. He chose the name Medea for his new locomotive. She was the third one to be built for the Moors Valley Railway, where she can still be seen at work with the other steam engines. Medea is the largest of the three small engines of the Moors Valley Railway. She has an older brother called Talos and an even older sister called Tinkerbell. The three engines usually share the same track in the engine shed at night. They are all tank engines, which means they carry their water supply in tanks on the side of their boilers, and not in a special truck behind, called a tender. In the winter, the railway is not as busy as it is in summer. This means the trains are shorter and easier for the engines to pull. Jim, who owns the railway, usually chooses Medea to run the train service on Saturdays in winter. Medea has a lovely coat of chocolate brown paint, and she loves to show it off as she pulls trains of excited children all day long. In very cold weather, steam can float in the air for a long time, and it's not unusual to see Medea puffing really hard up Tinkerbell Hill with as many as 8 coaches full of well wrapped up children all watching the steam hanging in the air above the train. Medea is also secretly very proud of this display and loves to glance back at the long white plume of steam trailing behind her. Winter slowly turned to spring, and Medea was enjoying the warmth of the sun as she pulled her first train of the day past the lake. Suddenly, she noticed something strange at the edge of the lake. It looked like a small island made from reeds and other plants. Each week, as Medea steamed past the lake, she noticed that this strange-looking island was getting bigger and bigger. What could it be? That evening in the engine shed, Medea asked Tinkerbell what the strange island in the lake might be. Now, Tinkerbell is the oldest and wisest engine on the Moors Valley Railway, but even she didn't know. "I think there is a way to find out, but we need Mary's help," said Tinkerbell, and went on to explain her plan to Medea while the other engines in the shed settled down to sleep. Mary helps Jim to run the railway and knows a lot about the birds and animals that live in the park. Mary is kind to all animals and always makes a fuss over the pet dogs that visit the railway. Even very nervous dogs soon make friends with Mary. Tinkerbell knew about the special understanding between Mary and the creatures that lived in the park and was sure that she would help Medea solve the mystery. Every morning, Mary rides around the railway with Jim to check all the fences are still secure and that nothing has been broken or damaged during the night. As always, Medea sat patiently while these checks were made. It would soon be time to put the plan into action, and while waiting for Jim and Mary to get back on the train, Medea tried to remember everything that Tinkerbell had told her the night before. As the train approached the mysterious island, Medea remembered Tinkerbell's plan and got ready to do something that she had never done before in her life. she would stop the train by herself. This is really a very naughty thing to do, and until now only Tinkerbell had known how to do it. But she had passed on the secret to Medea, who now braked as hard as she could and hoped for the best. Luckily, the train stopped right next to the island. Medea would now be able to hear what Mary had to say about it. Medea glanced back and saw Mary pointing at the island, and at that moment a graceful swan glided across the lake and settled down on the island. "Oh, how lovely! The swans are nesting on our lake!" Mary exclaimed to Jim. "So that's what it is," thought Medea excitedly. "A swan's nest!" Meanwhile, Jim had gone to ask Medea's driver why he had stopped so suddenly. The driver explained that he had not touched the brakes. The two men checked Medea and all the coaches, but could find nothing wrong with them. Medea sat quietly, hoping Jim would not discover her little secret. She knew he'd be very cross with her if he found out that she had stopped the train herself. Jim was still puzzling over the mysterious stop when he arrived at the station. "This happened once before with Tinkerbell," thought Jim, scratching his head. He hadn't been able to find a reason that time either. That evening, after Medea had returned to the engine shed, she explained to Tinkerbell and the other engines that she overheard Jim and Mary talking about the swan's nest. They said that the female swan had laid some eggs. Over the next few weeks, Medea looked at the nest each time she passed. The swans took it in turns to sit on the nest, but occasionally Medea caught a glimpse of the eggs as the swans changed places. Then, one day, Medea was alarmed to see the nest was empty, but not far from the nest were the two swans, and close beside them swam 7 tiny cygnets. This is the name for baby swans. "They don't look much like swans," thought Medea as she watched their parents fussing around them. Then she remembered hearing Mary say that cygnets were born grey and only turned white as they grew older. Medea wondered if they were like steam engines, which have a grey undercoat to stop them from going rusty, then a shiny top coat of paint. Perhaps the cygnets needed a top coat of white feathers. Spring turned to summer, and the railway became busier. The trains were now much longer, 12 coaches or more, and far too many for Medea to manage. The larger and more powerful engines of the railway were now needed to pull the trains. The trains made a splendid sight as they passed each other on the curves alongside the lake. The swans swam over to the passing trains as they always did, hoping to see Medea, but she wasn't there. They waited eagerly as each train passed, but still there was no sign of her. The swans knew that Jim's engines sometimes visited other railways, but surely Medea would not have gone away without saying goodbye. Where could she be? The swans didn't know that Medea was sitting in the dark engine shed, longing to be out in the sun and chuffing past the lake where she knew her special friends would be. When the big engines returned to the shed each evening, Medea always asked them how the swans were getting on. They told her how quickly the cygnets were growing day by day. Already they were half the size of their parents. On very busy days, Jim would allow one of the smaller engines to come out and pull a small, extra train. Medea eagerly looked forward to her turn so she could see the growing Swan family for herself. She stood impatiently in the station, steam blowing from her safety valve. At last the guard blew his whistle and waved his green flag. She was off to see the Swans again. Medea had promised Tinkerbell she would never stop a train by herself again, but she couldn't resist slowing down just a little each time she passed the Swans. Jim had noticed how the Swans always took a great interest in Medea's train, and he was sure Medea slowed down whenever she passed them. But he pretended not to notice. He just let it all remain a secret between Medea and the Swans. The end.